you said you might do a lot of layoffs. If DOGE is already reducing the federal workforce, why is it necessary to link more federal jobs cut to a shutdown?
Well, the Democrats want to shut it down, so when you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats. A lot of good can come down from shutdowns. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things.
Bueno, señores, oficialmente estamos en el cierre de gobierno, desde a mediados de noche. El gobierno está totalmente paralizado y Donald Trump no solo decidió que sea así, sino que el día de ayer, en una conferencia que fue la última del día, estaba hasta emocionado, como si estuviera celebrando la idea de paralizar el país. Solo imaginen esto, diciendo que este cierre, que este shutdown, pueden salir cosas buenas, como despedir a miles de empleados, tener el control sobre el pueblo estadounidense. Señores, autoritarismo puro. Un reportero le lanzó una pregunta clave, y es, si tú mismo dices que ya eliminaste el despilfarro, el fraude, el abuso en el gobierno, ¿por qué entonces utilizar el cierre como una excusa para despedir a cientos de miles de personas? Claro, Trump, como siempre, respondió con una ensalada de palabras absurdas, pero bueno, empecemos con eso.
Mr. President, as we inch closer to a government shutdown this morning, you said you might do a lot of layoffs. If DOGE is already reducing the federal workforce, why is it necessary to link more federal jobs cut to a shutdown?
Well, the Democrats want to shut it down, so when you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats. As you know, this country, no country can afford to pay for illegal immigration, health care for everybody that comes into the country, and that's what they're insisting. And obviously I have an obligation to not accept that. That would affect everybody. You know, when I see what we're doing with AI and all the plants that are opening up in the country, $17 trillion is coming. And if you compare that to Biden had in 4 years, less than $1 trillion. We have 17 trillion, more than that. I think it's going to be much more than that, David. By the end of this year, I think it's going to be far over that. It's a record. It's already a record in 8 months.
Luego se jactó abiertamente de que este cierre de gobierno va a servir para atacar a los demócratas, especialmente a los empleados públicos, los que no les simpatizan. ¿Qué clase de presidente presume de utilizar un shutdown para castigar a sus opositores? Pues bueno, aquí tenemos uno.
I think it's going to be far over that. It's a record. It's already a record in 8 months. It's a record by a lot. And so we're doing well as a country, so the last thing we want to do is shut it down. But a lot of good can come down from shutdowns. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things, but they want open borders. They want men playing in women's sports. They want transgender for everybody. They never stop, and they don't learn. We won an election in a landslide. They just don't learn. So we have no choice. I have to do that for the country. Yes.
El congresista demócrata Don Beyer lo dejó claro. Donald Trump ya lo hizo en su primer mandato. Vuelve a hacerlo ahora. Y recordemos, señores, es cierto, en el año 2018 o 2019 hubo un cierre de gobierno. Y no, los cierres de gobierno nunca son buenos. Son malos para la economía. Son malos para la gente. Lo único que hacen es subir los precios. Pero claro, hoy tenemos a Trump animando el caos. Y mientras todo esto pasaba, él se puso a hablar de una carpa azul afuera de la Casa Blanca. En serio, señores, estaban a unas cuantas horas del cierre de gobierno y su mente estaba en una carpa. Escuchen.
We've had a home run in D.C. You can walk out. Brian, you got mugged here a long time ago.
Yes, sir.
And the mugger must have felt some pain because you're a tough cookie.
Well, he had a gun, and I wish I would have had.
I know. Well, then, if he had a gun, all you could do is say thank you very much. Yeah, no, but it's everybody here. I mean, you were here in the room when I said to the reporters, who got mugged in the last year? And like half of the people raised their hand. Now, if you said who got mugged over the last 60 days, nobody. Nobody, no killing, no nothing. And the restaurants are booming, the town is booming, it's clean. You know, the National Guard actually went out and started cleaning all the crap out of the parks. The tents are knocked down. We had one that you said it was a blue tent, and you said it was a communist tent, right? See, we're going to have a communist mayor of New York, so, you know, let's see how that works out.
And I'm getting a lot of feedback on that. Everyone's very appreciative.
Yeah. You told me about a blue tent, and I said, I can't be there because we knocked them down. But this was a very highly sophisticated group of people that had permits and all the other thing. Well, their permit expired. We knocked it down. It took, 24 hours less, maybe.
Sure.
So I appreciate you telling me that. No, we have a great thing going. The country is doing incredible. We are a hot country. The hottest. We're the hottest country in the world right
Do the
now.
parents of the kids have anything?
Y claro, no podía faltar la cuota de los amiguitos. Donald Trump presumió que Linda Mahone está yendo tras la educación en los estados demócratas y que van a hacerse cargo de California. Señores, ¿están escuchando eso? Se van a hacer cargo de California. Escuchen.
I get 97% bad press, and I won in a landslide, which tells you the press has no credibility. But I will say that what we've done has been a great tribute to the people that's standing behind me in different forms. Linda in education, different, but what she's doing in education, she's sending education back to the states. That's a big move. The states, like, you go back to Indiana, Iowa, I would say 40 states will be great. 45 will be, the 5% of them will be pretty good, and then you're going to have a Gavin Newsom and some other people that aren't going to do a good job, but, we'll help them out. I want to help them out.
Pues bueno, en ese mismo día, el día de ayer, en otra conferencia de prensa, también desde la oficina oval, Donald Trump soltó otra mentira monumental, que supuestamente había traído 17 trillones de dólares. Yo me pregunto, ¿dónde están? ¿En qué cuenta? Porque el tesoro, ahí no aparecen, y esos son datos públicos. Lo más grave es que dijo que este shutdown permitiría hacer cosas médicas para dañar a la gente. Literal, señores, presumió de utilizar un cierre de gobierno para lastimar a ciudadanos en el área de salud. Totalmente enfermizo. Escuchen.
We have $17 trillion being invested, so the last person that wants it shut down is us. Now, with that being said, we can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. And you all know Russell Vought. He's become very popular recently because he can trim the budget to a level that you couldn't do any other way. So they're taking a risk by having a shutdown because of the shutdown, we can do things medically and other ways, including benefits. We can cut large numbers of people out. We don't want to do that, but we don't want fraud, waste, and abuse. And, we're cutting that.
Más tarde, un reportero le recordó que la ley prohíbe que el gobierno federal financie la atención médica para inmigrantes indocumentados. Y bueno, le preguntó cómo es que podía acusar a los demócratas de gastar 1.5 trillones en algo ilegal. Y su respuesta: mi corazón es más grande que el tuyo. En serio, señores, eso dijo. Escuchen.
Time for that.
You're not eligible for the healthcare subsidies that Democrats are demanding. So can you clarify, what are you talking about when you say Democrats want to protect their healthcare?
So when an illegal person comes in, a person who came into our country illegally, therefore breaking the law, and look, we all have big hearts. I have a bigger heart than you do. They're all breaking the law, and they're coming into our country. And we just, as a country, cannot afford to take care of millions of people who have broken the law coming in. We want them to come into our country, but we want them to come in legally. Now we have a strong border, very strong border, thanks to Christie and Tom Homan and the whole group. They've done an amazing job at the border. I mean, we had a border that was reckless. We had a border that was a disaster. They were coming in by the millions. I say 25 million people. You're saying less, but I say 25 million people came in illegally. And no system can take care of the health care of all of those people that came in.
Mientras tanto, Brooke Rollins, secretaria de Agricultura, se estaba llenando la boca diciendo que Trump es el presidente más pro campo de la historia, pero en la misma frase admitió que la situación de los agricultores está mal y que se pondrá peor. No, que supuestamente esta era la edad dorada para el campo. Bueno, al final el único que se ha llenado los bolsillos es Trump. Escuchen.
Farmers are getting a little angry, a little antsy here. It's pretty clear they support the administration. They understand what's going on, but they're sort of caught in the middle. China specifically trying to hurt them in its tariff war. So what should they expect from the White House?
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Charles. And I loved your introduction. I think it told the story perfectly. For so long, this country has been basically built on the backs of our farmers and our ranchers. President Trump has been the most pro-farmer president, perhaps in our lifetimes, perhaps in history. But this moment of uncertainty in the farm economy is real. And there are many reasons for that. Obviously, the ongoing trade negotiations with China and others, but it goes way before that. Under Joe Biden, the cost of inputs went up 30%. No new trade deals, which you showed in that chart, which was actually a great chart. It's pretty remarkable that in 4 years under Joe Biden, there was not one new trade deal. And we went from an ag trade surplus under Trump 1 to a $50 billion ag deficit under Joe Biden. And we're now just beginning to crawl our way back out of that. But the times are changing. Listen, it is a golden age. It's around the corner. But this president on Liberation Day at the White House, when, we were all watching when he announced this new tariff and trade world realignment, that it was going to take a little bit of time. But in that time, we've already struck 7 or 8 deals. Japan, the UK, the EU, Indonesia, the Philippines. I mean, I was in the UK 2 weeks ago selling ethanol, supposed to be in Japan tomorrow talking rice and other row crops. We'll see with the government shutdown if that happens, but it is going to be gangbusters. But right now, the farm economy is not in a good place. We're working around the clock. The president has committed to supporting our farmers, and we'll have an announcement on that very soon, likely next week.
Para rematar, el secretario de Comercio, Howard Lutnick, salió en una entrevista diciendo que estamos viviendo el boom de la manufactura. Entonces el periodista le preguntó, si tú dices eso, ¿por qué hemos perdido 80,000 empleos en ese sector? ¿Qué respondió? Que no era cierto, que era mentira, que Trump simplemente es el mejor. Así de simple. Escuchen.
So you've already alluded to the national security interest in a lot of the reshoring of manufacturing that the president's tariff regime is designed to do. But some reports suggest that we've lost up to 80,000 manufacturing jobs since the president took office. Walk me through that tension there, that contradiction.
Well, it can't be true. I mean, sure, the first day, you walk in from the Biden administration and what happens on the next Friday, they blame Donald Trump, which is silly, right? The tariff world is going to bring in the greatest building of advanced manufacturing it's not the country's ever seen. It's not even possible.
Como si no tuviéramos lo suficiente, igual el día de ayer Pete Hegseth también apareció en esta reunión, conferencia, lo que ustedes quieran decir, con los generales, los altos militares, dándole órdenes a los generales que nada de barbas, nada de pelo largo, nada de paganos nórdicos en el ejército. Paganos nórdicos. Escuche.
This also means grooming standards. No more beards, long hair, superficial individual expression. We're going to cut our hair, shave our beards, and adhere to standards. Because it's like the broken windows theory of policing. It's like when you let the small stuff go, the big stuff eventually goes. So you have to address the small stuff. This is on duty, in the field, and in the rear. If you want a beard, you can join special forces. If not, then shave. We don't have a military full of Nordic pagans. But unfortunately, we have had leaders who either refuse to call BS and enforce standards, or leaders who felt like they were not allowed to enforce standards. Both are unacceptable. And that's why today, at my direction, the era of unprofessional appearance is over. No more beardos. The era of rampant and ridiculous shaving profiles is done. Simply put, if you do not meet the male-level physical standards for combat positions, cannot pass a PT test, or don't want to shave and look professional, it's time for a new position or a new profession.
Así que amigos, por esto es que no nos sorprende, ¿no?, que en las últimas semanas y meses veamos cómo encuestas en estados claves nos demuestran cómo es que Trump está hundido, sus índices de aprobación en números rojos. Y tampoco sorprende que la mayoría de los estadounidenses lo culpen a él y a los republicanos por este cierre de gobierno. Porque no es que lo enfrenten con pesar, señores. Están celebrando el caos. Ahora bien, amigos, como les mencioné, Pete Hegseth apareció pues el día de ayer. También apareció Trump en esa misma reunión y dijo un montón de disparates. Pero lo que vimos en el Pentágono, señores, no fue cualquier cosa. Sin filtros, Trump llamó prácticamente a una guerra contra ciudadanos de Estados Unidos, señores, contra su propia gente. Pero lo más escalofriante no fue solo lo que dijo, sino el silencio sepulcral con el que los generales estuvieron escuchando. En este discurso hubo un montón de disparates, pero Trump pidió que el ejército tratara a las ciudades de Estados Unidos como campos de batalla, como zonas de guerra. Incluso llegó a sugerir que se usen como zonas de entrenamiento. Sin duda, un quiebre total, más que todo con la tradición militar, ¿no?, estadounidense, que siempre ha sido no partidista y ha sido más enfocada en amenazas externas, no en ciudadanos que piensan distinto. Pero bueno, veamos esto y volvemos a analizarlo.
Today, the president made what are widely called unusual, perhaps unprecedented remarks in the modern era. And I'm going to show you exactly what he said and why military veterans and many other experts on a nonpartisan basis say this is one of those inflection points you need to confront. It is unusual to gather this many members of the military in peacetime. The president made this public address so everyone can see and hear what he is saying to the military. And he explicitly said this military under this Trump administration must better focus on attacking, quote, the enemy within. And as for the controversial and sometimes legally overruled use of just the National Guard in America, the president rhetorically pushing past that, explaining that he views the military, which we'll show you was quite careful to be quiet during what are widely seen as partisan remarks. He will use the military on American cities for what he calls a training ground for a new type of war. Now, some of this may be rhetoric alone. There is always a difference when you observe and cover the government between what politicians say and what they do. If we were covering this speech for you tonight and there had not been the deployment of National Guard and other federal forces in the nation's capital, in California, and skirmishes over it in many other places, it would look different. But our job is to report to you what the president is saying and what he is doing, what he is trying to get away with, sometimes under very pitched court battles. The context here, hundreds of generals and admirals were summoned at a cost of many millions of dollars from their posts around the world to hear the president. Now, again, in all fairness, although that itself is unusual, the president can do that. He is commander-in-chief, and he may have reasons, policy or otherwise, that he wants to summon them. And had this been a normal address about patriotism or readiness or even foreign policy goals, people could debate it, but that would be a more conventional use of the commander-in-chief powers. Instead, he used those powers, summoning these people up and down the rank, to talk politics, to talk partisanship, to talk about how he wants to use the military on you if you are watching this inside America. That, of course, breaks with a long nonpartisan tradition of how to address the military. There's also the discussion in here that the Pentagon should regard U.S. cities as, quote, a big part of war.
Portland, Oregon, where it looks like a war zone. They're brave in our inner cities, which we're going to be talking about, because it's a big part of war now. It's a big part of war. The radical left Democrats, what they've done to San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon.
The president making a wholly unprecedented claim that the military should use cities where Americans live as, quote, training grounds. Now, again, in all fairness, a sitting president has every right to talk about crime in the country and how to deal with it. Most of that's dealt with at the local level. Police tend to be part of your local government. That's why if you are in trouble, you're usually dealing with the police, right? You're not dealing with the FBI, but there are times where there are federal crimes as well. President is well within his grounds in general to talk about trying to lower crime in America. But having the U.S. military do it and call it war, way out of bounds. The Washington Post reporting this new speech marks the first time President Trump publicly directed military leaders to be a major part of fighting a war from within U.S. cities. If we get to a wartime footing, if we see this president trying to summon war powers in our country, don't say he didn't warn you. And don't say you didn't hear about it if you're reasonably informed. You can watch it on the news or read it on your phone, but we have been warned. It's not happening in a vacuum. The president has already sent, as mentioned, all kinds of federal agents and troops into various places, sometimes masked agents carrying out lawful immigration authorities, but in unusual ways. Sometimes military troops to Los Angeles, again, partly overruled in the courts, and in our nation's capital, where there's a time limit he may yet test under law, and vowing, as you heard just there, to do more of this in the coming days. People close to Trump and former aides say this is part of something he is planning to test or abuse national emergency powers in the future, to distort elections or potentially try to reverse an outcome. And before you say, well, that sounds like a hypothetical, the president, current President Trump, lost one election. And he did not leave peacefully. We all lived through that. This was a vindictive tone from the president today. I'll let you hear it for yourself as he insists U.S. troops should now target Americans, which he calls, again, the politician, his opinion, he calls them the domestic enemy.
Last month, I signed an executive order to provide training for quick reaction force that can help quell civil disturbances. And this is going to be a big thing for the people in this room because it's the enemy from within, and we have to handle it before it gets out of control. While America is under invasion from within, we're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are under invasion from within.
The president making a claim there that is essentially false. Rhetorically, as a matter of language, you can't be under invasion from within. As a matter of foreign policy, you have to identify a foreign threat, usually a country, sometimes what they call a non-state actor, but it's a foreign threat, not fellow Americans. Now, what you see here is important. The assembled generals, admirals, and others there were respectful, but silent. Under military protocol, anything deemed a partisan or political address or claim, unlike, say, the Pledge of Allegiance, will be met with silence. And just about everyone in that room, best we could tell from our reporting, met that standard. Indeed, for Donald Trump, who so assiduously courts political audiences, holds more rallies than others, he was unaccustomed to a room this silent, and he felt the need to note it while also issuing a statement that I'll let you assess for yourself.
I've never walked into a room so silent before. This is very... Don't laugh. Don't laugh. You're not allowed to do that. You know what? Just have a good time. And if you want to applaud, you applaud. And if you want to do anything you want, you can do anything you want. And if you don't like what I'm saying, you can leave the room. Of course, there goes your rank. There goes your future.
There goes your rank and future if you leave the room. A fact check. The president said, if you want to applaud, applaud, as if it is a personal choice. And that may have just been a sentence, a slip of the tongue, but fact check, false. Under the military rules, it is not about the personal agreement or whether you choose or want to cheer or not. Like many other rules in our nonpartisan military, it's not about the person. It is about a wider vow to defend the country and the Constitution. You cannot cheer political remarks in uniform, period. I want to bring in Paul Rakoff, who's the founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America, host of the Independent Americans podcast, and someone who has, through his service and his advocacy, been a leading voice on civil military relations for some time now. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
What about this speech was traditional under the rules, and what departed from the rules? Just starting there.
Nothing about it was traditional. The entire thing is unprecedented. We didn't gather all our senior military leaders after 9/11. So there is no precedent for this. And I think that's really important to frame what is the latest step in the removal of the guardrails that protect the politicization of our military. I've said for weeks, and especially right now, the most important story in America and in the world is that Donald Trump can do whatever he wants with the greatest military the world has ever seen. That includes bombing Iran. That includes hitting ships off the coast of Venezuela. It includes sending troops into American cities, now like Portland. And it includes bringing together over 800 generals from around the world for what turned into a very overtly inappropriate, unacceptable political speech that was bookended by kind of a culture war TED Talk from Pete Hegseth, who is hollow, who is fragile. And I think it was a very deep low point, not just for our military, but for our democracy.
And the president, let me ask you, the president says, oh, you can applaud if you want to and agree.
Right.
But that's not what the military rules say.
Right. And I think if there's a silver lining, the discipline and military bearing of the generals in that room is it. They did not applaud. They held their bearing. Most of them didn't want to be there and know this is inappropriate and unacceptable.
Ok amigos, aquí está lo peligroso porque Trump está equiparando a los propios ciudadanos de su país como un enemigo interno. Esto no solo es retórica dura, es un intento de normalizar la idea de usar el ejército contra el pueblo. Ojo señores, no es teoría, ya lo vimos, ya lo hizo, ya lo intentó, el despliegue de la Guardia Nacional en ciudades como Portland, Washington D.C., Memphis, Chicago, los cuales fueron frenados en parte por tribunales y otros no, porque Chicago está lidiando con esto. Sé que algunos me dirán, pero que un presidente pueda hablar de seguridad y de crimen, ¿cuál es el problema? Ok, es cierto, pero todo mandatario puede, ¿no?, preocuparse por la violencia del país, pero una cosa es hablar de seguridad pública, que eso, como bien sabemos, corresponde a la policía y las autoridades locales, a menos que ellos pidan ayuda al gobierno federal. Y otra muy distinta es llamar al ejército y usarlo como una herramienta política, porque eso rompe totalmente la Constitución. ¿Para qué existe entonces la separación de poderes? Y es que ahí es donde está el detalle, porque Trump no está hablando de seguridad, está hablando de poder, poder para intimidar, poder para aplastar disidencia, poder para convertir a la institución más poderosa de Estados Unidos en su fuerza personal. Ese, señores, es el verdadero peligro. Y lo más impactante, ¿no? Vimos el silencio de los generales. Ninguno aplaudió, no reaccionaron a nada. Es más, algunos que veían ahí con la cara agachada. ¿Por qué? Porque sabían que estaban escuchando un discurso político, algo partidista. Las reglas militares son claras. No pueden aplaudir propaganda. Bueno, pues podemos considerar que ese silencio fue su forma de resistencia, ¿no? Pero también nos refleja, y lo podemos notar, lo tenso, lo frágil que está el equilibrio entre lo militar y lo político bajo este segundo mandato de Trump. Esto que vimos no fue un discurso más, fue un intento abierto de Trump de militarizar la política interna, ir preparando el terreno para utilizar luego a este ejército contra las ciudades. Pero bueno amigos, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que los militares podrán resistirse si es que Trump decide llevar esta ideita que tiene mucho más lejos? ¿O creen que este silencio puede ser el inicio de una peligrosa complicidad? Los leo en los comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.